Okay, today is Monday, August 3rd, 2015. It's 1 o'clock, and we will go ahead and open the regular trustee meeting, and we will begin with the minutes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have an agenda before us. Are there any additions, modifications? Departments? No special requests? Nothing.
Move to approve the agenda as presented.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Paxton? Mr. Krebs?
Yes.
Move to approve the payroll of August 5th, 2015 in the amount of $260,044.68.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Paxton? Mr. Krebs?
Yes.
Approve the bills in the amount of $44,225.97.
Second.
Mr. Paxton?
Yes.
Ms. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Krebs?
Yes.
Approve the minutes of a regular meeting held July 20th, 2015.
Second.
Mr. Paxton?
Yes.
Ms. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Krebs?
Yes. This time we open up the podium to any citizens desiring to speak. Seeing none, we'll move on. We have no old business, no new business. The administrator's report, Mr. Amrine filling in for Mr. Zahari.
The only thing I have this week is the Sheriff's Department report. If there are any questions, I will convey that to the department. That's on page 3.
Are there any questions on the sheriff's report? Thank you, Mr. Amrine. Move on to finance.
Following on page 11 of your packet is the finance biweekly report.
Any new awareness items or anything that we have for future that we give? The move is complete.
Payroll working properly. Still has some issues with the payroll.
Yeah, it's just one.
I'm yelling at you. We're still waiting on Windstream to move one line too for the fax machine up there, so.
We did have some problems this morning with OSL. It didn't export the data from OSL into Paycor. There were some changes that were made last week by Mr. Schubert, and that created some glitches, and it didn't even export anything. So we had to do payroll by hand this morning, so because we didn't have workbooks any longer. So we used the timesheets and we hand keyed in payroll to the system. I'm not really sure what more we can do, but it's not. This was a non-FLISA cycle, which was fortunate for us, because if it was a FLISA cycle, then we wouldn't have been able to extract the data to pay FLISA. But thankfully, this was not a FLISA cycle, so we didn't have to. But it wasn't. The information wasn't coming from OSL in order to pay them. So.
What the bugs or the uploading issues that they're having? Do they have those with any of their other clients? Or
I'm not sure that they're doing as extensive calculations with their other clients in the FLISA cycle that we are doing, which is creating some of the hiccups.
was this an algorithm issue or was it an uploading issue?
It was a communication issue from OSL to Paycor, something that he did. I had him on the phone. He was traveling about his cell phone. I called him. He tried to remotely go in and fix it. It was half an hour, then we waited, and then I called him back. He said it was still another half an hour, and I couldn't wait any longer. So I just went ahead and did it by hand.
So it's not a calculation issue?
It's not. It has nothing to do with this side. It's whatever changes he made to capture some of the FLISA data on bonuses and things like that has now created a problem, because batch 93, which was last payroll, exported properly. Batch 94, which is this payroll, he was having a problem with it. He said that it was his problem. He was going to try to fix it, but he was on location somewhere else, remoting in, and he was limited at what he was able to perform on his end. Fortunately, it wasn't a fleeces cycle, so we went ahead and hand keyed the payroll off of the timesheets. So it's, you know, we haven't, really, it's been challenging because of all of the calculations that it's doing in order to capture all that fleeces stuff that's necessary, which was the original problem that the board wanted to fix in the first place.
Right, that's my guess. The question, is it a calculation error or is it an uploading it?
I think it's a combination of both. I think the calculations that they're trying to do is hanging up and exporting it. So hopefully,
Maybe correct, you're the IT guy, normally you would, and I don't know how your involvement in this, if any, but normally you would calculate, and then you would have data, and then you would upload that data into another package.
this is an error that we got that we've never seen before.
It's a communication with the SQL server and everything. SQL server is functioning fine, everything, it's on his end with it. Calculations are okay, it's just the communication, exporting the raw data from the database out to the proper format to send it to Paycor. And he's, I guess he did make some changes and he's working that, so the communication will continue between the server and OSL.
With our contract that we have with them. And I think it had to do, it has the maintenance after an initial point. I would hope that whatever that was, when the maintenance takes place, is subsequent to the completion of the payroll being done accurately, completely. So whatever the time frame we had, I think should be extended to be commenced the time that this whole process is truly complete. Because it's never supposed to take this long. I think it's supposed to be complete in June, right? I remember. But this is not very pleasing. We know it's not your fault, I'm just saying that.
I'm just very
Oh, what's
thankful
that, right?
that we have the forethought enough to continue both processes, because I would have really been there would have been problems if we didn't.
Thank you.
Ask you this, so we get into the place of what if, because this could happen again, if they don't get it straightened out on their end, it might be the end of the fence cycle, and that creates another mess. Under that contract that we signed with them, what is their liability in this?
I'm unfamiliar with what the contract, I was never privy to the contract, so I would have to go pull it and find out what they would provide to us. I wasn't involved in the contract.
Well, normally they would have a deliverable, but they promised that they said they could do an interface or not. So, I guess what I'm looking for is if we didn't have Paycor involved, how does their system work for everybody else and not us? Because I mean, is it
Well,
is Paycor
OSL
the issue, or is it?
Well, OSL is not a payroll company, so whoever is using OSL, whether it's another entity, they gotta use that data to prepare a payroll in some form, whether it's in-house or the third-party payroll software.
Correct.
So,
Is the problem Paycor, or is the problem with the AOP and?
well, this morning it appeared that the problem was the communication from the SQL server between OSL and Paycor. So your question is, if we got the data from OSL, could we get it some other way into a payroll? You know, I don't know. That information has to be extracted to some kind of a payroll software, whether you're hand doing it on UAN or you're using another system, it's gonna be the same problem.
Right, that's
Yeah,
what I'm asking.
because it doesn't prepare the
If
payroll.
they had
OSL won't prepare the
They
payroll.
were not proposing we change it, they were
Right.
saying, like Xenia, if they use OSL, who do they use for the?
They do their own in-house payroll,
Okay.
so they get the data from
take-
OSL and someone hand keys it into their accounting system, whatever that may be, whether it's SSI or CM, whatever it is. I'm not sure what they're using.
Okay. So because, at some point you have to ask your question, is it OSL? Is it OSL and Paycor? Is it OSL and Paycor and any other payroll service? Or just asking.
It seemed to be,
We went to
communication
OSL.
from the SQL server to, and I think it probably would have been to whomever we were using if we were trying to extract the data, because it seemed like whatever changes he made between batch 93 and 94 has created the hiccup.
Perhaps we should have the individual who's in charge of it from OSL come in to our next meeting and explain something.
Well, he's in Canada, so it would be a travel, and I think that would be outside the scope of the original contract. He's fulfilled the 2 trips that was in the original contract, so that would be outside of the scope.
But he has not fulfilled the integration of
Right.
OSL to the payroll.
But we made the changes, correct? He didn't just make these changes,
They were changes that were required,
requested.
yeah, required to make sure that they capture the correct FLSA data on bonuses and.
So we've asked them to do something, they've tried to implement it, it just didn't, it
Yeah.
wasn't implemented enough or for whatever reason to capture for this.
Right.
You hope that it is by next time,
Exactly.
but yeah. So so it's not like it's the same process of last payroll and no changes were made, but we asked.
The last payrolls widgets have been correct. We
Well,
have a new list for this
I
one.
think so, but I was unable to see the data, to see if there was any importing error by employees, importing error. I was unable to see that this morning, so I don't know.
Employee errors or supervisor, not doing the correct oversight is not an OSL problem.
That's correct,
that's
and I
employee.
don't know if we had any of those this time, because I was unable to get the
And
data.
then the next question is OSL calculating correct? Is the data correct? And the third component is the interface between OSL and whatever third-party service we use for payroll.
Well, to answer your second question, it was missing a few things. It wasn't calculating Lisa on some things correctly, which is why the changes were implemented this last 2 weeks, which has now created the communication error between the SQL Server and payroll. So that was,
Normally, numbers,
yeah, I think this is probably a very unique situation for him. I don't know that they, I'm not sure that they do it this way in any other, I don't think I know.
but then,
Data.
Mr. Allen, if you could just ask, when the audit comes back, when he returns, then at least what I would recommend is that we pull the original contract with OSL and we redefine what those deliverables were that we were expecting. And the deliverables essentially, as I understand them, were, like I said, the calculation. So number one is, are we getting good data or not? Number two, what's the problem with the interface? Because it's every payroll we run. And then in order to fix and then quote test and debug, they should be doing it, not waiting for our next payroll to run. They could do a mock payroll and figure out the communication issue. So, because, I mean, data crunching shouldn't, they developed an algorithm or whatever it is that is gonna calculate the overtime and all of the payroll. So take all those factors in, and that should be separate from a communication issue with a SQL server. So those are two independent issues and they should have nothing to do with each other.
Correct.
So, number one is, do we have integrity of data? And number two, what are they gonna do to fix the problem? And if they can't,
With the
then they can
interface.
tell us they can't, and then we can make other decisions based on that. So, but the root problem was making sure we had proper calculations, and then we had the formula embedded. And so,
Right.
as long as that's step one, if we're there, that's fine. Now let's figure out the communication issue.
We weren't having a communication issue at this point, which is the reason why we stopped doing the workbooks, because it was working really, communication part was working really, was working well.
Right, we also need to make sure that we have, from a support standpoint, and communicate this, at least from me, I assume from the board as well, but typically, you're not dealing with just a one-person show. So there needs to, hopefully, there's more than one person in the background for tech support if we have an issue. So if this person's on site or on the job or traveling, we have 80-some, 90-some people to pay. Okay. So just time to revisit that
I'll convey
contract,
that
look at
to-
the deliverables, see if they're followed through or not.
I'll convey all that to Mr.
I agree.
Zabara. Yes.
Well, I commend the fiscal office for following through with payroll, doing it by hand, and happy to do that still. And I also commend the fiscal office for the timely move and all this stuff you had to do in between the meetings. I'm sure it was quite a process.
Well, thank you to the road department and the fire crews, because they did all the heavy lifting.
Whoever helped you move.
Getting
this.
organized was on us, but we were back up by Monday, so.
There we go.
Anything else for finance? Right, thank you. Mr. Ambrose, human resource.
Next report in your packet was zoning. The zoning report begins page 13 and 14, I'll be happy to take any questions. Oh,
Page one.
did I miss, oh, there was no report from Human Resource, okay.
So zoning,
Zoning, page 13, any questions, I'll be happy to.
We picked up a few more this week, a few more housing permits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we're at, what, 55 now
This
for
was
the
it.
year?
Mhm.
As opposed to 25 at this time last year.
there any other activity at Stone Ridge? In between Stone and Wall? I think it was Stone Ridge.
Spring Ridge?
Spring Ridge was
Yeah.
Arnold's development on Train 9 by.
Right, the 4 or 5 acre lots.
Oh, Stone Ridge, no, that one slipped out of my memory, no, I've heard nothing from anybody on that. The initial presentation to the county didn't go the way they'd hoped, and I don't know that there's anything going on that.
I saw that another piece of property with Gilbert Hardware is going for sale, so I didn't know if that was being rekindled or not. So,
I haven't heard anything.
okay. Any questions for Mr. Amrine on zoning?
I know I'd asked or requested, I'm not very busy, so I'm not pressuring anybody, so I want to forget about this. The developments that have been approved and all that, what percent of development are of this each one at, you know? Because when they presented the plan, they had so many lots, right? So if there's a house, how many of these permits issued for houses out of those, each of those lots? So we just kind of get a percent of
Percentage of build-out
exactly where each.
for each approved subdivision, okay,
Just curious.
okay.
Don't put it in front of the exam, but if you think of while you're doing it.
It's not hard to do,
Okay.
I just forgot. Okay.
Interim working out pretty well.
Okay, the next item, information technology, beginning on page 15.
Any awareness items, Mr. Terry? that we need to be aware of?
The voicemail system's starting to act up a little more frequently, having to reboot it a little bit more often. I was hoping we might be able to wait till next year where we could budget for it, but we may end up having to replace it. I still need to get with Chief Easter and discuss the boxes, mailboxes, and get a good solid count. But looking between 6 and 7 grand, I guess, to replace the voicemail. That was that mid-range price presented to you a couple of meetings ago. And currently having some latency issues throughout the stations and the network. We're looking at
And auto attendant is up and running and working as far as we've got with the move, everybody.
all the numbers have been reprogrammed and in the right, pointing in the right direction there.
Good. Any other questions for IT? On the roads, Mr. Allen?
The road department biweekly report was on page 17 of your packet.
The emergency access issues at Bexley Hills, are those, I don't know if that's under you or under Chief? It's kind of both, I guess, but as far as, is that still, is that resolved, is that? The issue was the encroachment of the eve of one of the houses.
Well, the way we left it was they needed to prove to us that the roadway was still there,
They have
And
not
to this
done
date, they have still not done that.
The phase, section 3B of Bexley Hills was approved conditionally by the full commission of the Regional Planning Commission. And one of the conditions was exactly that.
that it requiring a secondary access, or that would be proven, what was the condition? That was it.
There is an easement in place, and where it is right now is that the developer intends to demonstrate to the satisfaction of the commission that the emergency access that's in place now will work. The commission did make a suggestion about the location of the secondary, the emergency access through section 3B, utilizing streets that are already going to be paved anyhow to minimize impact on individual homeowners, relocating open space and so on and so forth. And I've had an initial conversation with the developer about that, and we will meet probably this week about it. So he's moving on the issues, but he knows that he has to demonstrate that the emergency access is usable.
On the bucket truck, have we had need that we have not been able to fulfill, or have we not needed a bucket truck this year yet?
We've needed it 3 or 4 times. We've rented equipment. The last windstorm, trying to figure out how to word this. We needed it to open the roadway back up, but we did some improvising to,
Snow.
you could say that. We'll just leave it at that.
Sure.
But we are progressing forward. We did hear back from the city. We're kind of working on a sharing program. They have one need, we have a need for something on a 24-hour basis, available whenever. Theirs is being used currently 3 to 4 days a week. So we've kind of had the initial conversation of maybe if we get a smaller one that fits into our price range, that they can use when they do smaller projects. And then when we have the need for a bigger one, we have access to theirs. And the sharing part of the equipment actually last Friday, we had a little bit of free time and the guys went up and looked at one when Mr. Sahara comes back, and I'll be having a conversation on whether we pursue that one or not.
Any other questions? Thank you. Any other questions for roads? Mr. Graham, Mr. Fox? Thanks, Jim. Fire, Mr. Amber?
The fire section begins on page 18. First up are 3 purchase requests having to do with Mark's annual user fees. I'll pass these on to the board. And I think
Chief, do you want to
I
give some
think I just
background?
as soon defer to the chief
Yeah,
to
go
explain.
ahead, get some background on each of these requests.
This is the same request that the road department brought last time. It is the annual subscription fee for Mark's radios. There's 3 purchase requests because they come out of 3 different line items in our budget based off of the specific usage of the different radios. It is a state term schedule. It's a service provided by the state actually. Probably the one thing of note is because of the partnership with the Greene County Commissioners in the state of Ohio, 70% of the cost is being paid by credits. So the residual is what we owe at this point in time, and that's the cost that you have in front of you today. There are 3 separate motions, one for each of the purchase requests.
So you're saying that the total that we're doing here is only 70% of the actual cost?
That is my understanding of the explanation that was provided by Chief Easter.
We have that. And the purchase recs are all written the same way. Can you break down, can you tell us, we have three different. So this,
There are three different cost centers, so there's three different, either
this
encumbrances
is
that
all
will
the
be coming
first
from.
item, the Mark's annual user fees, this has nothing to do with the Matic computers or anything else?
Correct,
Okay,
correct.
so these are just three
Right,
purchase
one is
requests.
for the cost center for operations, one for
They
interoperability,
sort
one
of
for
match up,
dispatch.
what was it, up here,
Okay,
960, this dispatch consoles.
yeah, there it is, I see it. Sorry.
And it's just because the way we break down our performance-based budget.
We do need-
Motion,
Yeah, I'm
then
gonna
second, we can have discussion.
move to approve purchase request 08456 to Ohio DAS Treasurer's State of Ohio, for state, for Mark's radio services in the amount of $960. And that was going to be for EOC dispatch consoles.
And then she just signed for it.
And authorize the township administrator to sign to the board.
So,
Any discussion?
yeah, so I have a hard time hearing what you said, but we're getting, you say we're getting a 70% discount on these?
That was the information that was provided to me, yes.
So what we're paying is 30%. So when can we expect a 70% discount to go away?
As noted in the packet that I prepared for the board last week, item 1.3, the credit will last for at least 5 more years ending in fiscal year 21,
Okay.
June 30th of
So 5
2022.
years we can expect that 70% discount, or maybe more than that.
Provided the state doesn't step in the meantime and provide an alternative, which they're actually working on. They're looking at funding the MARC system through an increase in 911 tax fees, cell phone tax fees is my understanding. So there is a potential that in that 5 years it could drop to 0 as well.
The current
Yeah,
sunset,
one
the
way or
current
the other.
sunset clause is 22.
Correct. Our current agreement is 22, yes, sir.
Any other discussion on that motion?
Okay, I see in this were 14 of those township radios or maintenance.
That is
That's the
correct.
question I asked you, right, so that's 14. Okay. That's already been paid? Is this information that's, did we approve that? No, we didn't approve that.
It's been approved, the bill has not been paid, we're waiting on
To pay the
the other
entire
half
US.
so that we can do it all at one time.
Okay. The dispatch consoles, EOC, is that the EOC room right over here? Right over there?
Yeah, the dispatch consoles they're actually laptops now, so they can go anywhere. They could operate here, they could operate in the command unit. They could be taken down to Beavercreek Police Dispatch, they could go to Greene County Dispatch, wherever they're needed. They just need an active internet connection.
Again, I think I asked the question in the last meeting about the radios that aren't being used. Since we had a staff reduction from part-time to full-time, we have an accumulation of radios that aren't being used, portables. Are we
Yes.
still paying the fees on those?
These are just for the radios, and again, it's documented in here, just for the radios that are turned on and being used.
Okay.
Any other discussion? You can call, please.
Ms. Graff,
Yes.
Mr. Paxton,
Yes.
Mr. Kretz.
Yes.
Move to approve purchase order 08457 to Ohio DAS Treasurer of State for Mark's radio services in the amount of $1,200, and to authorize the township administrator to sign for the board, and this is for interoperability.
Second. Where are you? Where is it?
No, this is separate, it's the same block of, expense, but it's broken out into three different allocations, so just, it's another component of what you're talking about.
Second.
Give it a second, all these.
I just want to come, I'm mentioning it so that it doesn't look like we're doing the same thing 3 times for different amounts, but that it's for different areas, which is why I'm mentioning the areas.
Ms. Graff,
Yes.
Mr. Paxton,
Yes.
Mr. Kratz.
Yes.
All right, make a motion, make a motion to approve the purchase rec 08456.
458.
458 is the next
We're at
one.
58.
All right, we just did 457, all right?
Right.
We did 457. All right, 458. The Ohio DAS Treasurer of the State for Marks Radio Services in the amount of $6,240 and authorize the township administrator to sign the board.
And this is for operations. Second.
Discussion. Mr. Paxton, Ms. Graff,
Yeah?
Mr. Kratz.
Yes.
Thank you, board.
Next item.
There are 2 purchase requests that are grouped together under tablets for the medics. This information is begins on page 19. One is for request for the tablets themselves, the other is mounting brackets and hardware for the mounting. 2 purchase requests for that. If you have any questions, direct them to the chief.
Any other background you want to give us, Chief, on this?
Yeah, this is kind of 2 things that we've talked about recently. One is, this is a replacement of computers that had been in the medics. Up until now, we've used the permanently attached Data 911 consoles. They're in the process of being stepped down, they're end of life, so they're being stepped down to reserve or secondary locations. And as a cost-saving measure, we're recommending that we do the same thing we did with the staff vehicles, which is instead of going with those permanently mounted hardened Data 911 systems, to go with the Surface tablets. We've started running those at senior staff levels. They're working well. It gives the medic crews not only the computing that they need to maximize their time with the patient and at the hospital for the reporting requirements, but it also gives them a little bit of flexibility as to where they do the reporting. So with the Data 911 terminals, they were restricted to being in the medic. With the Surface, they could actually go into the EMS rooms and do the reporting in the rooms as well, which gives them some flexibility as far as interaction with hospital staff and having maybe a little nicer environment for sitting down to write a report as opposed to the back of a patient care compartment of the medic. So again, by doing this, the cost is approximately half of what the originally projected cost was because we're going to the different form factor and getting some additional savings there.
When they are, take the tablet into the ER, or ED, I was told it's called that. And it says currently they do handwritten reports and leave a copy, take a copy and do it. If they do everything on the tablet, do they have printout capability to leave at the hospital so they don't have to do a handwritten report also?
Yeah, I believe all the hospitals now have Bluetooth-enabled printers, so they can do a connection to the printer and print a hard copy. And that is kind of the standard that most of the departments are working at right now. We're actually getting ready to begin work with it's a group of physicians that represent both Kettering and Premier Networks. They're coming up with an interface to the Epic data system that the hospitals and the healthcare providers use that would allow us to transfer everything electronic, so we wouldn't even have to have that hard copy. That's kind of the loose link in the chain right now. And so as they work through that, us being electronic already, and having our system in a nationally recognized format, or a state recognized format, at least state of Ohio format, we'd be able to transfer the information electronic without having to go through that paper step. We're not there yet, that's in the process of being started, but it would handle, like I said, both of those systems, the Kettering system and the Premier system, which is obviously probably 95 to 98% of our patients fall into one of those two categories.
Any other questions for the chief or for the motion?
Question.
Let's go ahead and make a motion, we get a second, then we can have discussion.
Move to approve the following purchase request 08454 to MNJ Technologies for mobile computers and accessories in the amount of $9,744.44, and to authorize the township administrator to sign for the board.
Second. I don't see anything in here about it. Is there like any kind of annual fee for these things, or software upgrades, or anything like that?
The software that they run is Firehouse, which is handled separately, it's enterprise software, so that'll be coming up probably the next month to 2 months for our annual subscription. But other than that, it's the standard Windows base that falls with everything else. I don't believe there's ongoing Windows costs.
Is there a pad component to that Firehouse software? Is it an additional program that you gotta,
It's an add-on to Firehouse, correct?
does this price include that?
No, we've paid for the base price of that. We have to decide if we want to continue support for that add-on. This software will actually, it's not a tablet in the sense of it's not an iPad or an Android that requires a dumbed-down version of the program. This will run the full Firehouse package, and so we're not likely to want to continue using the tablet version of that software. They just run the full version from the beginning, so there's no integration and there's no need for data conversion. That's something that we'll explore, but if we don't need it, we continue the savings. If we do need it, we just have to resume that support cost. And that's something, again, that we would address with our Firehouse subscription when that bill comes. I think that comes in August, September. But the only other software would have would be the operating system. And there's no ongoing support or cost for that.
All right, so the computers we're using now, they have to do that in the Matic itself, right? That's what you're saying. They have to complete their report while they're in the Matic?
Yes.
So the pad, what does the pad have that they can take into the hospital that the laptops don't have?
They're not laptops in the medics, and actually I believe all the old ones have been stepped out of the medics now. I think the medics are without computers at this point. So it's either putting in a replacement for the Data 911, which is essentially like a desktop, but it's permanently mounted. It cannot be removed from the unit. It's which was the Jeff Ochester, when he was here, he was a big advocate of that, having a hard-mounted piece of equipment in the medics. This would give them a computer that they could remove from the medic. They could take it to the patient on a scene, say for terms of refusals or things like that. They could take it into the ED for reporting purposes, or they could use it in the medic while they're performing patient care, or at the hospital if they chose to. I just don't know any guys that would choose to.
Okay,
It
so
gives them flexibility.
It'll be on a AT&T network or a Verizon network, is that?
Yeah, all the existing, I think they're all on Verizon. I think we have
Verizon.
maybe one on Sprint. I believe the rest are on Verizon.
So that'll be additional fees for these pads to go on to.
No, it would be taking the place of the Data 911s that were already on Verizon. We've taken the Data 911 out, instead of putting it with, and they have a data connection, instead of putting a Data 911 back with that data connection, we're gonna put a Surface back with that connection. So the wireless cost is already existing.
Same connection, different hardware.
Yes. Now, that said, you bring up an interesting point. If the broadband test is successful, this is something that could be the FirstNet broadband, which they're going to be beta testing, I think is third or fourth quarter, first quarter, or first and second quarter. I can't remember which it is. If that test is successful and they roll that out, these devices could go across that FirstNet broadband. I don't know if there's a cost savings or if there's just an improved performance. but they would be able to operate on that new FirstNet system, which is the federally funded build-out of the public safety data network. And I believe that's through Verizon also, if I recall correctly.
You don't see an increase in broadband that would drive the cost of the use of the program up? Because
No.
now they're gonna be using.
No, it's gonna be different hardware using the same software on the same data connection. So there shouldn't be an increase in cost from that perspective.
I just remember reading in that report you did, the internal, report, one of the things I mentioned in there was the frustration with using the computer system was already in the medics. And based off of the frustration not being able to complete the report in a timely manner, and sometimes kicking them off and have to start over again with the report. Would this solve that problem?
I believe so.
Is there?
I believe so.
The Surface tablets work very much like the iPad. It's a portable computer which you just sort of turn on.
Right,
Off,
the
you don't
difference is
plug
at
it
the
in,
operating
so you
system
just,
level, correct?
Boot it up.
Yes. And they'd be capable of using the hospital's Wi-Fi, they'd be capable of using our data connection that we provide with the medics. I believe Kettering Hospital is still the one we have the most trouble connecting to, but it's one of our least traveled hospitals. So I don't know what the specifics are, if they've improved that since the last time we've looked at it. But Soin and Valley South, which are our two primary destinations, both have excellent coverage. So it'll handle the bulk of our transports from that perspective.
So you've hopefully increased portability, improved connectivity, maintain the same
And streamline the workflow and provide a better work environment.
Been using and are accustomed to by the nature of the OS.
Yes, sir.
You create the opportunity to leave it behind because it is portable
Yes,
versus
sir.
a stationary fixed in the unit. So there's that opportunity, so it's more personal discipline
Yes.
to make sure it's put back.
Yeah. It is substantially cheaper than the Life Pack though, and the Life Pack's just as portable. So we're hoping that they bring both of them back with them. But you're absolutely correct. There is a chance for it. The advantage that we do have is that because of how it's tied in with CAD mobile and things like that, if they don't have it, they'll notice pretty quick because they won't be able to do all the other reporting requirements they have. They should notice before they leave the scene, for example. It shouldn't be a get to the hospital or get back to the station or a day later figure it out.
And do we have the remote hooks into those, that if we do leave them accidentally behind, that we can find them and that we can fight them if needed?
That's an excellent question. I assume so, but I don't know for sure. I can find that out.
There's a simple find me app just to make sure we know where it's at. And number two is be able to remote in and wipe it.
Yeah, I believe they can be wiped remotely. I think that's matter of fact, that's one of the advantages of going to the Enterprise Firehouse Edition that we have now, is that no data resides on the device itself. All the data is on the server, and it's just screenshots fed out to the device. As far as all the other pieces and parts, I assume that you're absolutely correct, that we could have a wipe clean function.
Just throwing it out there,
Yeah, that's
something to consider.
very cognizant of that sort of thing with HIPAA. So the data we're good for, I can find out about the rest.
Okay. Any other discussion on this motion?
Ms. Rock,
Yes.
Mr. Paxton,
Yeah.
Mr. Krebs.
Yes.
Motion to approve purchase request 08455 to P&R Communications for equipment and installation services in the amount of $845, and to authorize the township administrator to sign for the board. Mounting bracket and hardware for the town. Where are they mounting them?
I'm sorry?
It says there's a mounting brackets and hardware for the tablets. Where will they be mounted? Somewhere in the...
Yeah, it's the piece that the case that they're on, the case and the device are portable, but there's a bracket they clip into to hold it secure during transport. I believe it is attached in the passenger compartment, with a monitor, an existing monitor up in the front. But I could have that backwards. It might be mounted in the front with a monitor in the back, and I can't remember which one he said it
It's
was.
a docking station of sorts.
Exactly, yes, sir.
So someone who would be in there would either see it gone or not.
Either way, whether they see the device or whether the slave screen would be blank because there is no device attached, they would be able to tell. Yes, ma'am.
That was an answer to yours, that somehow before they left, they noticed that something wasn't in place.
We hope, yes, ma'am. And we have ways to fix it if they don't.
Any other discussion on this motion?
Ms. Graf,
Yes.
Mr. Paxton,
Yes.
Mr. Kretz.
Yes. Okay, next item.
Next is it's introduced on page 20 with an agreement itself following on pages 23 through 27. Is for approval of an external training agreement between the fire department and various EMS education programs.
This item, I believe, and I don't know if Ms. Frick's associate can help us with it, I believe she's reviewed it and was either party to drafting it or has reviewed and approved it. I was hoping to get that clarification from her here today. So essentially, we have on a regular basis students who come to us to get their clinical field time for their either EMT program or their paramedic program. And so we've offered this at least back into to the early 90s, if not before, for students to get clinical hours and experience. Some programs have a very specific agreement that they need written, and then some don't have any, and so this is to fill that gap for programs that don't have any, to have a general agreement that says, here's what expected of us and our limits and liabilities, here's what's expected of the program and the students and how those things interact. So again, without Ms. Frick here, I don't know if that's something we can move forward unless you know anything about it. But it's supposed to be generic.
And it's my understanding that Dawn did have a hand in drafting portions of this agreement. It's also my understanding she's reviewed this and has approved it.
So with that, the timeliness from our perspective on it is that one of our full-time candidates is in a program that would be covered by this, and so it needs to be executed from us for him to get full credit for the time that he is putting in, both as an employee on the medic and as a student on the medic, so that it will count towards his overall clinical hours to get his paramedic so that we can then hire him as a career employee. So that's our direct connection to it, but obviously we want to make sure that it's executed for any other students that come in and get right along experience with this as well.
Is this replacing something we've done in the past?
No, I think it's filling a hole for places that didn't have one or had one that was substandard.
Because the practice isn't new.
No, not at all. In the old days, it was done with a wink and a nod, and then we moved up to handshakes, and now I think we're to well-executed agreements. And so my understanding is this is going to be, matter of fact, most of the programs I believe are going to, I think Sinclair and we were a primary driver in this, but I think this is the model that a number of other programs are going to fall under as well. That's what I've been told.
And Ms. Frick and legal is fine that this doesn't create, by further defining the deliverable that we're going to provide, we're not creating more liability for ourselves.
No, in fact, it's the whole purpose of the agreement.
Okay, just want to make sure, because sometimes if you don't define what you.
And I know Dawn looked at this, and I know she approved it, so I think we'll look through it.
All right, thank you.
I hear you say that it's for, the necessity of this now is for a previous employee credit for the.
No, the purpose of this is to fill the void that is missing. One of our employees will benefit from its timely execution. One of our current part-timers who is in paramedics as partial fulfillment of his conditional offer will benefit from being able to have his time
That's
here
what
used as a.
that was going to be my question there, is if, and I don't know the policy of Sinclair and how they get their hours, but if we create this policy right now, does it retroactively give this person the hours?
I have no idea about that. I don't know if that's between he and Sinclair. That's not our concern. Our concern is making sure that anybody from Sinclair or any other program that falls under this agreement are covered, and we have an understanding of what our limits and liabilities are with
We
them.
had a policy before, St. Clair, we always worked with St. Clair.
We've had a number of policies with a number of different programs before, but they've all had issues. This is something that I believe Chief Betzinger's been working on for a while now because of some of those issues. And I know for a fact that we've had students that have come from programs that wanted to ride that didn't have an agreement. So again, this one, we're looking to sign initially with Sinclair, but in the future, we anticipate that we will have other programs, Green County Career Center, Miami Valley Technical College, different places like that that would probably fall under the same agreement for their students. Cedarville Community College, I'm sorry? Clark State, Upper Valley, yeah, there's a number of programs that would likely end up with this. And if you look at the actual agreement in the back, I believe the language is vague as far as the individual agency, or not agency, but individual program that has to be filled in at the time of the agreement.
Do you have the agreement? Is it on?
It's in here.
Yes, it's an attachment in the
It's in the
packet.
packet, yes. The actual agreement begins on page
Yeah, I
23.
printed that one.
As presented.
Whereas the Beavercreek Township operates the Beavercreek Township Fire Department, which provides fire and emergency medical services to the incorporated and unincorporated areas of Beavercreek Township. And whereas the Beavercreek Township Fire Department is occasionally asked by schools or organizations licensed under the authority of the Ohio Department of Education, State Board of Career Colleges and Schools, and the Ohio Department of Public Safety to place students with the township to provide an additional learning opportunity by observing members of the township's fire department providing emergency medical services and externship. And whereas an agreement between the township and the school organization is required before said externship can commence. That's my motion. Need a second.
Second.
Now therefore be it resolved. I'll give it out.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Paxton? Mr. Kratz?
Yes.
Now therefore be resolved that the Beavercreek Board of Township Trustees, Green County, Ohio hereby adopt the attached agreement to be utilized for all said externships, and be it further resolved that the township administrator will have the authority to enter into and sign all agreements for the said externship for the township. And there's an attachment A that would be part of the resolution.
Yes, that's gonna have to be cut and pasted and bring back to you and sign it.
Yes.
It didn't get put together right. Thank you. Yep, I'll vote it on.
Yes.
Okay. Next item, approval of work rules, lateral entry.
Yes, this is introduced on page 21 with the actual language of the proposal on pages 28 and 29. On page 21, this concerns lateral entry hiring, and it's a request to modify existing policy number 5130.001.
We just approved this policy. We just approved this.
No, the question, we discussed it, and this is making
Well,
it formal.
the policy was approved. There was an area that was, I guess, gray, and because of the intense discussion that occurred at the time of approval of this, we wanted to make sure that the language was clarified so that there was no confusion among staff or the board. And specifically, if you recall, in the physical requirements for the employees, we ended up with a dual requirement, one for CPAT and for a physical exam conforming to NFPA 1582. And the idea when we talked about it was that if employees had the 1582 from their current employer, because this is a lateral transfer, so the assumption is they're laterally transferring from an existing employer potentially to us, that would carry with them. And we talked around the idea of they may not have this, but we never really settled on what happens if they don't. And so what we wanted to do is clarify that if an employee has their current CPAT and they're currently employed, so they would not have to go to a police and fire pension physical, which we have always paid for, and we may be obligated to pay for, but we certainly have a history of paying for it, that the 1582 physical that would replace the pension physical would also be paid for by us. So they would have CPAT in hand. If they had 1582 because of their current employer, great, and if they didn't, we would send them to get their 1582 physical, and we would pay the cost for it. So we would be basically moving the cost from the traditional pension physical that we've paid for and may have to in the future if we don't have good lateral entry applicants, and essentially transfer that cost to the cost of the 1582 physical. Typically, the physicals are below the amount that's required to come before the board, but because, again, the discussion and the lively nature of it, we wanted to make sure that the board was aware that this was the intention of us moving forward and get direct clarification, or have you tell us that that is not what we're allowed to do before we end up with a situation where it's happened and we have to go back and change something. So Mr. Paxton's correct, we just approved it. We're looking to modify it by clarifying the language in that one section. It's highlighted in yellow, but it has to do with us paying for that 1582 pension, or 1582 physical in lieu of paying for a pension physical for a lateral transfer.
So we're not changing the requirements, or we're not changing the prerequisites that they have to come with.
Correct.
We're simply clarifying if the one component is missing,
The
who may
fiduciary
pay-
responsibility.
Who may pay for it, but not who's obligated to pay for it.
Correct. Because if they have it, then obviously we take advantage of the fact that it was in existence, it's documented. The problem is if they don't have it, either they have to pay for it or we have to pay for it. Our intent is to pay for it, but again, because of the nature of the discussion, we wanted to make sure that that was acceptable to the board before moving forward.
And if they were not lateral entry, who would pay for it?
We would pay for a pension physical.
So we would pay for one or the other anyway.
Yeah, and ironically, for the past, well, since 2005, I believe, we've paid for essentially 2 pension physicals for all of our full-time employees, because we sent them to a pension physical at time of hire as a part-timer, as, again, a kind of a fire stop as far as physical abilities. And then when they got hired full-time into pension, that physical was repeated because of the duration between the two. So we're actually cutting our cost in a.
That's my question was going to be, is it costing us more to hire the lateral entry or not?
No, it would cost the same or less.
Okay. This as far as testing alone goes,
Correct.
regardless of the other intrinsic values that may or may not come from hiring the lateral entry.
Yeah.
From a previous employment here or elsewhere, doesn't matter.
Correct.
The main question was, is this creating a burden where it costs us more? to
No,
hire
it is
lateral
not. It
entry?
will cost us less overall, and for most of these folks, it would probably cost about half of what our old system would have cost us.
Okay.
Which again, got tied into one of the reasons I believe it got looked at so closely during the performance audit. It was one of those double costs they identified.
Question I had, and I'm not, we might have answered it before, but I'm not quite sure of it. This talks about attracting foreign employees if we can, if not, and/or qualified employees from other departments with just a lateral transfer. What if we don't have any lateral transfer applicants? We go through the old time process?
Once we exist all lateral transfer eligible, and lateral transfer could be split into 2 kind of pools of candidates, former employees and not former employees. Once we've exhausted all of those candidates, then the pool of non-lateral transfer candidates has 2 sides also. One is people who are currently qualified but not currently employed. So they're either underemployed or unemployed, or they're working in a private but not in a public sector, something like that. So they may be firefighter, paramedic, working for a private ambulance service, or they may have been laid off from a full-time firefighting job. been working in some sort of educational or non-fire vocation. So they have the training and experience, but aren't actively in the pension system, so they would be non-lateral transfer. And then kind of the next tier below that even would be general population, similar to what, say, a city of Dayton may do, where they put out an open call and then they get an applicants and then they send the best applicant to get the training as part of their startup, which obviously is the highest cost to the organization. So that's one we want to pursue last. So we'd like to exhaust former employees who are currently employed elsewhere, then go to currently employed elsewhere, not former employees, then trained but not currently employed, and then untrained would be the fourth step down.
So we do have a long-term plan.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'm having a hard time hearing you. So what you're saying is, if somebody has an FBA physical, and we bring them onto our department, they meet all this other criteria, CPAT and high school diploma, driver's license, firefighter 2, paramedic and all that, they need that. That we're gonna go ahead and give them a pension physical,
No.
if they're in, so we're,
They would
not
not
a
be-
physical, but a physical of sorts.
No. If they have a CPAP,
I hear what you're saying, but I don't think that cost of a physical in the long-term interest of the township, I think it's a good investment for the township to physically assess anybody who comes in here, whether they have a firefighter that's been hired 10 years working someplace in another department. I don't think we should forego any physical of any kind, even if they already have one. If that's what you're saying is,
no,
We're talking about if they don't have it, who can pay for it?
they would
if
have
that's what
to,
you're- But if they have it, so the payment is an issue we're talking about, but if they have a pension physical already, somebody who's already in the pension, and we bring them into organization through this process here, if they have a pension physical, are we still gonna give them a physical? As part of the hiring process of the township?
the township hiring process would require them to have 2 physical-related certifications within 1 year of when we hired them. They would have to have a CPAT,
Right.
which is the physical testing, and they would have to have the NFPA 1582 conforming physical within 1 year of the data hire.
Okay.
So if they had those 2 things within 1 year, and the CPAT is automatically within 1 year because it expires. The 1582 doesn't expire, but it goes outside of our window of acceptance. So if they had one 11 months and 20 days, then we would not send them for a physical because they had a 1 year or less old NFPA 1582 physical. And they were already in the pension system, so they would not require an additional pension physical. If they were 12 months and a day, then we would require them to have, I guess it would be 13 months and a day. They would be required to go and get the 1582 physical, and we would pay for it because they didn't have that physical within the 1 year period. So there is a chance that within 1 year, they would not have a physical and get hired by us, the way the policy is written and the way we understood it.
I think that ought to be the.
If you want it when they walk in the door, then that's different than what we talked about, and that's different than what's written down. And we could certainly do that, we would just guarantee that there's a cost as opposed to having maybe a cost.
Is the physical, then, is passing the physical a condition of employment?
Yeah, it'd be part of their conditional offer of employment.
So,
If they didn't have one current
right,
and we were to pay for it, it would be a part of the conditional offer. The way the language is
yeah,
now.
if it's set to where they could take up to a year to get it, then that's.
No, I'm sorry, no, the idea would be that if they had one 6 months ago for their current employer, we would accept that in lieu of.
I'm saying if in the case that they don't bring it with, one that will port into our box that we
Yeah.
put on. So,
We would make that a conditional offer, they would have to complete it similar to how we do a pension physical now before they were hired.
okay.
And
So,
so it would be much more time than within a week or so of the conditional offer.
so back to my other question, then, does it cost more to hire a lateral transfer?
It does not, it would cost the same if we went kind of down the road, I think Mr. Paxton is advocating, which is we give everybody a physical at time of conditional offer. Because right now, there's a chance we wouldn't have to send them if they had that in hand. If we require that of every candidate, then obviously we'd have a guaranteed cost every time. It would still be cheaper than the 2 that we've done for our former employees, but it would be no savings either.
But the spirit of your request wasn't to change the policy.
Correct.
It was essentially to clarify that we have the option to pay
Yes, sir.
for it if they don't have one that they can bring within the window of time that's acceptable to us.
That is correct. Yeah, I was not looking to change the language, I was looking to clarify the fiduciary responsibility or obligation that we could incur.
Right, because we already say that it requires a current CPAT and, it doesn't say and or. It's
Correct.
And fit for duty.
And the CPAT is always one that's been the employee's sole responsibility. We've never covered the cost of CPAT. Correct.
What's your recommendation in your chief?
My recommendation is keep the language as is, with the clarification that we can cover the cost of that physical, so that we can move forward. Obviously, we're gonna be approaching a hiring here, and we need to have this cleared so that we can get a person in.
How much does each physical cost?
They're around 500.
See, that's a minimal,
Right, so.
that's a minimal cost in the long term. It's a minimal cost to get a good baseline on an employee. We take in CPAP, get physical, that's a good baseline, it's a minimal cost. I don't think anybody ought to come in here with a certificate. I think the door in here ought to be physical CPAP. I mean, before you start work, you have that physical. Whether they have a 6-month in hand or not, but approved through our system, which we have some control over, so we have a good baseline on where that employee's starting at.
Right, I would much rather have it that way.
Pardon me?
I would much rather have it that way. You have no idea what's transpired with that person between the time that they had that pension physical and when we were looking at hiring them. It's a great idea from a workers' compensation standpoint to have a clean slate, to make sure that there's no issues before we bring them in the door.
So that's going back and changing the policy to remove the 1-year window.
Yeah, we could just say, that's a condition of employment, we will send them and pay for. But again, that's different than what was determined at the last meeting.
Right.
So my goal today wasn't to change policy, although there may be good reasons to change the policy. My goal was to just make a clarification, so. I'm open to that, I mean,
Okay, so
again, the cost savings goes down with each of these increments that we had as well.
So the language change then is where it says within 1 year of the conditional offer, what are we changing that to? Within what? Within 30 days of the conditional offer? How long
I would
does it
say
take
that,
once you've got your candidate pool narrowed down?
following a conditional offer of employment,
Within.
or as a condition of employment.
Right, without a timeline.
Yeah. So, how would you spend language on
What
that?
wording would you like in point number 2 here?
So fit for, tell me if this sounds right.
It's legal, do we need to tie a date around that?
I would probably set this out to work with Dawn on getting the language. I think you want to try and put some time capsule around that. Not
Well,
anything.
when we've given conditional offers in the past, it's kind of up to me to just schedule things and, move the person through the process. And, that timing varies based off of the providers. So we've never put a specific time frame in there. But with that said, it's not something that drags on and on because we have a hiring date in mind that David and I have determined.
Right, so does your conditional offer have an expiration?
But based off the time that we determine that we want to hire the person.
You have an offer, a conditional offer with the date of hire stated in the agreement, whatever the agreement may be, and they have to comply with whatever conditions exist in that prior to their hire date.
Right,
And if they don't, the conditional offer expires.
right, and
Or
but,
higher date changes?
right, and that could change based off of meeting changes, but that's typically what.
I was just trying to avoid that we take the 1 year out, so it's going to take a year to get it. So if we're gonna tie it back to the conditional offer.
Yeah, the incentive obviously that I have in that not happening is I need to fill the position now, not a year from now, so. But yeah, getting the language tightened up so that it can occur is probably a good idea. And it needs to be tied to the conditional offer, because without the conditional offer, we can't require the physical. And without the physical, there's no point in having the conditional offer. They're so intertwined.
And then
But they don't get a formal offer from
from
me
the
unless
board's
they.
perspective, is there any concern over the township paying for that physical? That was the real reason this came before us today. No question.
Pay for the whole one.
So then at this point, I guess we table this until you've had a chance to work with Dawn.
So
Or
if
you
we
could
want
just-
this to comply with our regular hiring practice that all employees get a conditional offer pending whatever tests it is that we require, whether it's psychological and the background of the medical.
I think that the language that David suggested would be best. Again, we're running, I personally don't see the need for a deadline in there, and we're running against a timeline also with replacing the lieutenant that's retiring.
I think you suggested, trustee president, remove the within 1 year, fire department conditional offer, just leave bullet point 2B, fit for duty from an NFPA 1582 position. Because that would be the second requirement of the conditional offer.
And then leave in the language that the test may be paid for. So it's clear.
That's what the board was doing.
Or then you'd have to take out the second part of that sentence.
Fit for duty from an NFPA 1582 compliant physical,
Period.
period, okay.
And then this
And
may,
that's,
test may be paid for by the fire department, period.
Period.
Period. If it told you, that second piece wasn't.
Does that satisfy your point?
Yes, ma'am?
Yeah, because if somebody goes out on a medical leave for some reason, it's not job related, we don't take their doctors. We don't take their doctor's opinion and come back to work, we still send them to the fit for duty exam, right? So they have to pass
Return
it,
to work.
whether their doctor says they can work or not. We still have to come back to the fit for duty, so I say, and a new hire, we put them through that same physical fit for duty, but we put it through that same door, so.
Made a
I'm
motion.
not gonna
Can I ask a question?
year round.
Is it that the fire department may pay for the test or that they will pay for the test? When would be a case where you wouldn't, I guess is my question.
No, we're saying at this point that we will.
In this case.
They will, so we need to change that sentence that says.
Not necessarily, it may
necessarily.
still give us discretion if we wanted it. If we put in a will, then we're obligated 100%. So I would think we'd want the discretionary language in case there is something we haven't thought of that would allow us the opportunity to.
Provided by the fire department. Provided by the fire department.
I just didn't know if there was a time where you didn't want somebody to say, yeah, we did pay for him, but we didn't pay for somebody else, and I didn't want, so I didn't know.
And one possible example is somebody's in the running for us in Fairborn, they get
Right.
the
Got it
pension
within a week.
physical
Right.
from Fairborn, and then we make the offer, and they say, well, I wanna go to Beavercreek, not Fairborn. And they come over here and they have one that's, a week old that maybe we would wanna accept as opposed to.
That's the thing.
Assuming that Fairborn's already paid.
But then you haven't put a caveat in there of time. You haven't said it's, if they have one within 30 days or 10 days or 1 day.
We should still run through our system, because we can't ask questions, personal, we don't know why everyone didn't hire them, we can't ask certain questions, is that right about?
Well, I'm
medical?
still gonna have that report. I mean, I'm still gonna be able to see it. They will still have to provide that report to me, and I'll be able to see it and ask questions. I mean, after a conditional offer, I can do that.
But when's
And
the
if-
cutoff? So if they bring one that's 3.5 weeks old, is that good enough?
That would be, I mean, I would say it's fine, but that would be David's decision.
So is 4.5 weeks okay?
Yeah, I would say a month, yeah, 2
I
months,
think it's
yeah.
from the time of the offer till the hire date.
And that's
Somewhere in
actually what
that.
I was thinking is if it would be in our timeline otherwise, then is it something that we would wanna be able to, that's based off where the board discussion was, if I have a guy who's in the pipeline, and it's in the pipeline someplace else, I make a conditional offer, they make a conditional offer, and it works out that way sometimes. This is probably, we're probably talking about 1 in 100 or 1 in 1,000 or so. And we say, we're sending you for one next Tuesday, and it says, well, I just had one yesterday.
Right. Well, we're saying two different things. We're saying that if they have a recent one, it's okay, we won't have to spend the money to put them through another one. But at the same point, we're saying it's a good idea to put everyone through one because it's good for workers' comp.
So I think within the timeframe of the offer and the hire date, current medical, whatever, they should be available. Now, is that essentially what we're saying?
Those would be
Is that what you
the
want?
bookmarks
Well-
from my perspective.
I think we ought to have our system stick to it, because our system is for the
Yeah,
protection of the township.
I don't have a problem with that if that's the board's preference, that's
And
fine.
the person's not going to, they're not going to mind either, because they're,
Well,
getting on the
mine,
list for
but they'll do it.
a full,
Because it's a
full-time
job.
job.
Okay, so we're gonna modify the policy essentially on 3.2.1.
We asked the fiscal officer to repeat what she has there, so we know.
This is under F2, that you're
Right.
replacing a period, that the sentence will read, fit for duty result from an NFPA 1582 compliant physical, period. This test may be paid for by the fire department,
Period.
period, and then if you're going to add
I wouldn't add anything. I'd just
within
leave
the
it
time
like
frame
that.
of the conditional, okay. Period after fire department. That's all I have.
Right. That's what I think we want.
And that's your
You
motion
did
Yes.
a
to
motion.
approve.
That's my motion,
So,
to approve this with that wording.
I think I read that down. Ms. Graff,
Yes.
Mr. Paxton, Mr. Kratz.
yes.
Move to go into executive session pursuant.
But, okay, so things first. As far as your bi-weekly report, is there anything there that?
No, and actually, I was doing this in minor violation of the township policy because I was sitting in Minnesota when it happened, and my bi-weekly report was not able to be completed because of data connection issues, so I apologize. I'll have a full report for the board, including this intervening period for the next.
Any awareness items?
We had a structure fire last week. I was out of town for, I'm talking to Deputy Chief of Operations. It sounds like everything went as well as to be expected. It was through the roof prior to crew's arrival. It basically ran the attic. It started, as I understand it, from an overheated lawnmower in a garage. The house had some substantial smoke and water damage, but I believe most personal effects were able to be salvaged, it sounds like. So from the standpoint of what it was and how far advanced it was as good an outcome as could be expected. And then, if you guys are paying attention to the calendar, this is the 1-year anniversary of the Walmart incident this week, so I would maybe just keep your eyes open as you travel up towards the Four Corners in case anything's happening. Yeah, I thought there probably would be. I haven't been back on that to see anything.
The fire did make the news on several channels. And I did know that this is the first time I remember that Brighton Tech seems to be one of the first mutual aid responders.
Actually, they provide a fair amount of mutual aid for us in the northern part of Beavercreek. Southern, it's mostly Kettering, Bellbrook, and northern, it's Bright Pat and Fairborn a lot. And they actually did send 2 crews for us due to the heat and the amount of fire. We had Fairborn, Bright Pat were both there, and Bright Pat had 2 units, I believe, that were there. So they helped us out considerably.
And the auxiliary was on there.
Yes, ma'am.
Anything else for chief? If not, legal advisor? Mr. Kratz? Ms. Grant?
No.
Ms. Aaron's?
No, thank you.
Move to go to Ohio by, executive session pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 121.22B2, consider the purchase of property for public purposes.
Mr. Paxton?